The Sonic community is constantly at war with itself. There's always new issues of the week, new divisions, new groups of fans constantly debating over what Sonic should be or what games qualify as valid Sonic games. But there is one thing that we all agree on in unison, and that is what a disaster Sonic Forces was. I remember it like it was yesterday. When Sonic Forces first got announced, this looked like it was going to be the dream game. It was going to be a spiritual successor to Sonic Generations on a gameplay front, but it's going to be harkening back to, serious storytelling that we would get with during the Adventure Through Dark era. It really looked like they were turning things around, that this was the game we were finally waiting for after all the dreaded booms and Lost Worlds. Then it came out. And what we got was a very mediocre, very safe, by the numbers product that lasted only 2 to 3 hours, had some of the worst writing of the meta era, and was just an absolute embarrassment, an absolute disgrace. It does have its fans, it does have its apologists, but this is a game that most people can at least agree just, if not underwhelming, just an outright dumpster fire. But like many of Sonic Team or Sega's failures, this is where the modding community comes in. And lo and behold, let me introduce you to Sonic Forces Overclocked. Well, for many of you, this is not really an introduction because this mod is really popular among the community. This is a fan-made add-on of sorts, a fan-made extension that revisits Forces with a new story to tell that garnered really high praise by the majority of Sonic fans and was so highly regarded, it actually had a massive sale increase on Sonic Forces as a game, with many people arguing that Sonic Forces were worth picking up for this mod alone, that this mod redeemed that game. And while I'm of the sentiment that it is a good mod, as I'll dive into this video, I do think it is not without its caveats or issues, most of which is not the fault of Team Overclocked, but rather just a byproduct of the game it is set in. And that's what we're going to be getting into today, just kind of revisiting Overclocked and seeing what the hype was about and whether or not all of it was warranted. But before we begin, if you'd be so kind as to leave a like, I'd seriously appreciate it. It really helps out. And be sure to subscribe if you enjoy videos like this one. That said, let's begin. So as I kind of described earlier, this is a epilogue of sorts, only spanning 1 hour, which is not only impressive as far as fan-made mods goes, but is really half the duration of the actual main experience. The mod is set 2 months after Forces, where out of nowhere, Infinite makes his grand return after the vague fate that befell him during the climax of Forces, and he's not alone, having made an unlikely alliance with Neo Metal Sonic, who, due to the Phantom movie's influence, has escaped the meddlings of his master and has regained his rebellious nature. And so in full Mortal Kombat Deadly Alliance style, these two unlikely allies have formed a deadly duo and are threatening to destroy our heroes, snuff out the resistance, and begin a new world of tyranny. This is a pretty cool setup because it not only adds some more everlasting consequences from Forces, like what IDW did, further recontextualizing that game as a pivotal point in Sonic's history and, exploring the aftermath of such a conflict, but it also accomplishes 2 things. It gives us the grand return of Neo Metal, gives Infinite more agency as a character and more time to shine, and overall just explores the general aesthetic of Forces. This ragtag group of resistance members trying to stop Forces beyond their contemplation or ability to handle. And I think it's really cool, but I literally just said it, I'm gonna say it again. This really reminds me of the first several issues of IDW. I have to literally dust the cobwebs out of this thing because I haven't picked it up or read it in so long. This reminds me of the IDW collection, volume 1, like the Angel Island arc, where it's literally set right after the events of Forces, and it's kind of dealing with the aftermath of Eggman's roaming robots and what's left of the resistance kind of rallying together under Amy's leadership, which, like I said earlier, recontextualizes the events of Forces and makes it a big deal. It deals with the aftermath of that, and it's even the plot similarities are so crazy that it even gives us the return of Neo Metal Sonic. Dude, this book is so big. It's so hard to angle this thing in front of the camera. It's to a point where there are even references to this very issue in Overclocked itself, where like, you know, this frame of Sonic getting hit here is like illustrated beat for beat in one of the animated cutscenes, which is literally like animated in the style of a motion comic. By the way, can I just say like how good the art is in IDW? Like this, don't get me wrong, IDW has its problems, but dude, the art is not one of them. I just had to stop and say that. And you know what? On the topic of that, same thing applies to the presentation of these cutscenes. I absolutely adore the way these are drawn. I adore the way they're put together. And the voice acting is actually done by Adrenaline Dubs. I'm not sure the people who run the YouTube channel were directly involved, but I do know that like the actual voice actors, acquainted with Adrenaline Dubs, who, you know, voices those characters, are the ones voicing the characters in this game. And for those of you who don't know what Adrenaline Dubs are, they literally dub the IDW comics. So I bring all of those examples up to really express that this felt like a IDW what if, kind of like a branching timeline that really inherits a lot of like the IDW art style, characterization, and sensibilities. And I find that really interesting, unique, and even thematic because Forces was the jumping off point for IDW. So making this mod really IDW coded was actually kind of cool. Even though I'm not the biggest IDW fan, I can at least appreciate the consistency and just, you know, the effort that went into replicating that kind of feel. And there's more praise for the presentation to come, but right now we need to get into gameplay. And Overclocked is basically divided into 8 stages, one of which being the final boss. And now we can kind of talk about the level design and just the moment-to-moment gameplay, you know, the real meat of this mod. And does this redeem Forces? So like, let's do a quick recap of everything that was wrong with Forces. Actually, let's not, because that would be like 5 hours long. But just the general stuff, just automation. You do not control Sonic. And I know automation has kind of been turned into kind of like a buzzword. No one even really knows what it means anymore. But when I say automation, I mean lack of player agency nor expression. Just running in a straight line and just being propelled, your speed automatically handed to you on a silver platter by all these springs and dash panels and all this jazz that just really takes away your actual like player input, your control over the blue blur. So the question goes, does Overclocked fixes that? And the answer isn't a definitive no, but it's not a definitive yes either. Starting off positively, the levels are much more engaging and much more interactive. Okay, there's constant shortcuts you can do. There's like experimentation is encouraged with your whiffs. Like you gotta really like kind of look out for when's the best time to kind of activate them and like what will lead to the best kind of outcomes. You're constantly having to slide and like dash left and right to the side. Like you're pressing more buttons, basically. You're not holding down boost to win. It's demanded of you to actually engage with what's being like put on screen and play the actual game. And if you turn your brain off, it really is fun. Now, that sounds kind of backhanded, but I actually do mean that in a really positive way. It's like, this is kind of one of those things that like you can just play casually, and just the adrenaline, just the roller coaster feel of just blasting through at the speed of sound, collecting all these rings, visiting all these vibrant locations, home attacking, like these neat little chains. Like there's a reason why boost gameplay has stuck around for so long, and it's because there is inherent value here, and that is worth appreciating and acknowledging. But if this isn't your preferred Sonic style, this isn't your preferred gameplay, this doesn't redeem Forces because, and this is going to sound really bad here, but hear me out, this is more of Forces. The Forces DNA has not been taken away. This is very much the same game in the sense of Sonic controls the same way. In fact, he actually has the opposite problem of Forces, whereas in that game, he's really stiff and like really hard to move around. In Overclocked, he's extremely slippery. Either issue, he's really hard to control because you're really not meant to be controlling him for precise platforming. You're meant to be running either forward or strafing left to right. And that's it. This is a very linear, very segue, just, straight line level design, which a lot of people aren't necessarily a fan of. And I did speak of there being like experimentation being encouraged to like take more shortcuts, but the problem with this mod is its way of indicating where these shortcuts are actually not done even as well as it is in Forces. Usually when you pick up a wisp, in Forces. Right after you pick it up, you can automatically go, okay, it gave me this for a reason. And you can immediately start like pressing or looking around for like, let's say if you're running like the light speed wisp, you can be looking around for like a trail of rings. Or if you're running the rocket wisp, you can like kind of just start going up in the air, try and create like a jump chain, like of just endlessly collecting rocket wisps to like get to a preferred platform. Whereas here, that's not how it works. It kind of just encourages you to guess, and you can tell that they want to have more verticality in its gameplay, but because it's so baked into the DNA of Forces, where it's really hard to kind of just freely roam and explore, and like and even some scenarios, it literally locks you into a auto run. Running around and exploring kind of becomes a it becomes like a contradicting element to a game that doesn't facilitate that kind of playstyle. And it feels more like disorientated than even the vanilla Forces did. Now, there is nuance. I'm not saying Forces is a better experience. No, that game is a literal chore. It is a snooze fest. There's an entire stage that's just a water slide. There's an entire stage that is just a water slide. And no way am I saying that this is a bad alternative. In fact, I'm pretty sure I expressed right at the beginning that this is a vast improvement because there's actual engaging level design here that, you know, makes you stay on your toes and actually try to like, you know, perfect your run and like optimize like whatever shortcuts you can take and whatever paths you can take. Like there is fun here. It is a fun time, but it's a fun time set in Sonic Forces. And because the bar is already on the floor, while this is an improvement, saying it's an improvement almost comes off as backhanded because you can only go up from Forces. So yeah, a great way of summing it up, a great, just TDLR or however you say it, it's just the level design is improved, but the core gameplay is very much intact. And as I say that, I'm not sure that's necessarily a bad thing because as mentioned way earlier, Forces does have its fans. It does have its apologists. Some people really vibe with like the roller coaster, linear, straightforward design of Sonic Forces. And really, if this mod is serving as an extension of the base game that's so polished and, you know, so ambitious to the fact that it could really serve as an official add-on, is it better that it stays more consistent? There is a valid argument to say, yeah, like even if that consistency comes at the cost of what could be a better playing experience, it is more true to the identity of the game it's attempting to honor and kind of like expand upon. So it creates this unique situation where it really boils down to preferences on whether or not you can consider this mod an actual redemption of Sonic Forces. Because again, if you enjoyed what Forces was going for but thought the level design lacked much polish, well, this would be that, you know, ideal redemption. Like it fixes like what in your mind the only issue with that game was. However, if you're like me, you think the issues stem way further than just the level design and it boils down to just the way in which the game was designed, period, then this isn't really a redemption necessarily. It's more so just a consolation prize. That's what I would consider this mod. It's a consolation prize to the unfortunate souls who own this game. But we still have story to discuss, but right before story, I want to take a quick second to say the presentation here is really good. There are really decent stage remixes. There are interesting things done in some locations. Many people have said this in their videos that I watched, like when the mod first came out covering it, and I have to agree. Starting out in Starlight Zone on the first stage and like running through it, and then having this flawless transition to Green Hill or, you know, Ash Hill with like, you know, like just this like gray kind of color palette to it. I thought that was really sick. I want to see more of that in the official games. Just segueing between areas so seamlessly. We do have that in Crossroads, but you know, that's a racing game. But yeah, no, I thought that was so clean. That was so neatly done. Voice acting is pretty good. You know, the Adrenaline Dubs cast, you know, there's a reason why they're so successful and beloved because, you know, they're really good at what they do. Art style, color, tracks, everything. So yeah, I think this is a really polished package, especially for a fan made. That's one thing we gotta consider. This is all fan made. The fact that this even exists to the scale that it does is a really crazy accomplishment, and like that's just worth praising off virtue of it even existing. But now it's time to get into the writing, and I'm not gonna harp on this for very long because, you know, the writing is just there to kind of like contextualize the gameplay, in a sense, it's not like that big of a facet of the mod, but it is there. They did put a lot of work into the writing, evidently, because of, you know, how stylized and crazy the cutscenes are and how prevalent it is. Like, there's even a whole final boss. So obviously, you know, they wanted the story to be held in like a pretty significant regard. So I will cover that. And story-wise, I don't want to go hard on the writers because I don't even think the story is really that bad. And I'm not going to hold it to the official standards as official media because, you know, like the expectations of official media actually representing and having everlasting effects on future official media is way more essential than, you know, like someone's like passion project. So any criticisms that I have aren't really going to be like super negative or super exasperated. But I didn't really vibe with the writing of this DLC. That goes to show you how good this mod is. I called it a DLC, just this mod. It's a mod, not a DLC. It really feels like a DLC. But the writing doesn't vibe with me, and that's for one important reason. IDW. This is IDW writing. I was not kidding when I said this really does feel like an IDW project because the way Sonic's characterized here is straight out of IDW. The way everyone's characterized here, Amy, Neo Metal Sonic, like everyone's kind of like have their Flinterisms to them. And again, if this was done out of the want to have everything be really consistent and really authentic to what the writing standards are for IDW and what that's going for, like this is a really good replication of like the tonal balancing of the comics, like to the point where it really did feel like I was playing the comics. And if the goal was to replicate, just for that alone, I really do have to commend them because it is a good replication. But unfortunately, it's a really good replication, and I'm not a fan of the way, you know, IDW handles its characters. I'm not a fan of like jokey Spider-Man Sonic who, you know, is constantly like cracking wise and like annoying his enemies of like constant rebuttals and puns and whatnot. To me, that's not Sonic. Sonic is not Spider-Man, and he's very Spider-Man-y here. But I was more so let down with the way Infinite and Neo Metal are handled because this mod does something brilliant where it actually has it's a Neo Metal Sonic and Infinite are meant to be a thematic parallel to Sonic and the Avatar character, which really works because Metal Sonic is a perversion of normal Sonic. Those two have history. Those two are two sides of the same coin. One is, you know, represents, you know, artificial industrialization. It's just completely soulless, this soulless, cold, dead machine. And the other one is this pure, like unshackled, unbreakable, literal definition of light, definition of hope. He is the most soulful person in existence. And the Avatar and Infinite go without saying. Both of them were humiliated. Both of them were bested by a superior opponent and fled running. But whereas the other one, you know, like put that want and determination to get better towards good virtues and becoming a decent person and helping everyone out and becoming a hero. The other one became this callous monster who hid behind the power of the Phantom Ruby and basically masqueraded as a significant threat when really he was just a pawn. He was nothing at all. And that concept in Forces is really cool. It's just, unfortunately, it was showered in Partech and graph writing, so that was never expanded upon. But this DLC has I called it a DLC again. This mod has a perfect opportunity to kind of bring that to the forefront and really explore the dynamicisms between these rival-like characters and do some really cool thematic stuff here. And, you know, a Neo Metal and Infinite team up, like what would the relationship be like? What are their differences? How would they stand in opposition to each other? But like, what would they have similarly that will like bind together? How would this work? And unfortunately, and obviously, like, they don't have the full freedom to, you know, have like a 5-hour story mode because this is a mod, so they have to really condense everything into a 1-hour experience. So I'm not going to condemn the writing team for that, but nothing is really explored in an interesting way, at least not in a way that doesn't really feel superficial. Because this is IDW Sonic and not normal Sonic, he has that very like cocky, obnoxious nature, and he runs into things without thinking. And of course, this gets him and the Avatar into trouble. And later on in the story, he has this kind of like, the Avatar is fed up because, you know, Sonic didn't really consider what would happen. He just rushed to danger, disregarded him, still views him as a rookie. But Sonic, you know, apologizes for that, recognizes how far the Avatar has come in in his journey, and they band together, and whereas their friendship is stronger than ever, like their bond is unbreakable. Neo and Infinite start fighting like an old married couple, is really what Sonic says, and their alliance starts fracturing, and their power fails in comparison to the power of true friendship, and Sonic and the Avatar emerge victorious. And I don't inherently have a problem with that. The problem is that it has no time to breathe. And I feel like they could have set it up much earlier, but it really just happens. like the whole subplot of the Avatar being upset with Sonic's foolhardiness and it impulsive nature. It's introduced and resolved before and after a single stage. Like it becomes a thing and then it immediately gets resolved right after. So like it really just kind of comes out of nowhere and doesn't really feel earned or built up to. And this isn't Neo Metal and this isn't Infinite. There's just two generic bad guys in this. Like they don't really have those identifiable quirks that makes them interesting, you know. Metal Sonic doesn't really exhibit enough of his god complex or his insecurities of feeling like a pretender and really wanting to be the one true definitive Sonic, which is his way of saying he wants to be the one true definitive being, this the ultimate creation. And Infinite's insecurities of being nothing and wanting to be everything, again, you have really good characters and really good concepts here. It's just none of it ever really gets brought up or explored. And so what we get is a really good pitch for, an epilogue to Forces, a really good extension of that story, but it's a first draft. This feels like a first draft, and we didn't get that second draft that actually brings a lot of these ideas to the forefront. And I have to, preface this once again with saying this is a fan-made project where they have really limited resources, really limited time, really limited budget. So again, I'm not, condemning them like I would an official team. What's here is really cool. It's just a shame because I really think that if the mod was longer or they kind of took time to really iron out some of the quirks of the narrative, it could have really been something special and something that actually stuck with me, because there have been a number of fan-made creations that I'll pop up on the screen right now that are completely fan-made that I honestly love so much I practically view them as official in my eyes, or at least bordering official. But real quick, I do want to give style points to the final boss. The final boss is this really hectic, crazy chase sequence, and I really like how it's not just a big boss fight, but instead it's traversal based. This is how the majority of Sonic obstacles should be represented in media. I'm tired of Sonic kind of being viewed as a fighting series, so having a final boss where it's just Sonic and the Avatar trying to duck and maneuver through all of the Phantom Ruby's crazy constructions, I thought was really sick. And it's all being done with a fan-made song, Overclocked, pop-up. This is meant to be the celebratory final vocal song to complement whatever boss fight's happening, and the song's pretty sick. It's really cool. It gets me in the mood. It doesn't really feel like an appropriate song for a final boss per se, but I mean it just sounds neat. It's just really cool.
The dream just dance as the tension grows. Unleash the fury, let chaos flow.
What am I doing with my life? But overall, I think that wraps up my thoughts about Sonic Forces Overclocked. And I want to conclude by saying I think this is an excellent mod. And if you own Sonic Forces, the link to it will be in the description. I highly encourage you to download it and give it a try. It is dramatically better than anything the actual game has to offer. It actually has substance to it. But the sentiment that it's so good that it fixes the game and is worth buying, I feel is really silly and a really dramatic overstatement, because not only is it kind of really bold to say that a mod is enough to spend $20 to $40 on an official game where you're gonna get 3 hours of nothingness, but the mod itself isn't a complete transformation or reconfiguration of what the game is. This isn't kind of like Sonic Forces, this isn't like Sonic Frontiers Revisited, where it's actually a giant overhaul that's dramatically changing every single facet of the game. No, this is a extension. This doesn't really mess with the base game at all, and it's a 1 hour extension at that, and it really is just more of the base game, just done in a way that actually offers a fun playing experience. So I do not think this saved Sonic Forces, or that this is like up to what people are saying it was, or even saying that it is today. But that's not to discourage the mod team, because again, I have to preface this, it is a really fun mod. And to fans of Forces, to the 5 of you who exist, I'm just kidding, I'm just being an asshole. But to people who did enjoy Forces, or at the very least enjoyed Forces from a conceptual standpoint, this mod does offer so much value, and I could not recommend it enough. That said, what do you think about Sonic Forces Overclocked? Have you given it a try? If so, let me know in the comments. I'd be really interested to see what you think of the mod and whether or not it made you feel slightly better about owning Forces. That said, I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you have, please leave a like. It would dramatically help out, and be sure to subscribe for future uploads. Thank you so much for watching, and have a fantastic rest of your day. Peace out.